We are back with Mr. Marquis. Today on the docket, we have the obvious political theater that's going on in Washington, D.C. The 12th ballot lost by Republican Kevin McCarthy, and we'll discuss why that's important, as well as the Virgin Islands Attorney General was fired and is claiming that it has zero to do with the lawsuit, the civil lawsuit that was filed, basically saying that J.P. Morgan was complicit in the Epstein atrocity, for lack of a better word, that happened there under her jurisdiction there, as well as a possible Biden connection. So without further ado, how are you this evening, Mr. Marquis?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me again here. I'm very excited for this and Congress. What to even say about this these days? This really shatters the illusion that the government is by the people, of the people, and for the people. You would think that in a representative democracy, a representative republic, whatever buzzword you want to use to describe whatever we have today or supposed to have, whatever it is, it implies that the representative organs of the state are the most important ones. And if those aren't working, then supposedly all the rest are not going to be working either. Or at least that's a popular fiction that we're supposed to believe, and the popular fiction that's perpetuated by mainstream political science.
Yeah.
But we see right now that that's not happening. The government has, sadly, not withered away and died, even though Congress is in a complete gridlock and they can't figure out which direction is up right now.
Yeah, it seems though that well, see, the narrative being strung along, as I mentioned, I believe in the last or maybe even the previous one before that episode that we did together. The Democrats are supposing that their lockstep is anti-authoritarian, and there's a fascist. I'm not even sure what you would call a fascist nature to the fact that there's dissent in the Republican Party. But if you ask me, it's all just theater. I don't believe that any of these people are serious. We had I think somewhere around 8 defectors the first day, not voting for McCarthy, and then as he lost 2 or 3 votes the first day, and then it went on to the 4th, 5th, and 6th the day after that, and of course they always vote to go home somewhere in the evening. The last time this happened this many times was back in 1856. It took something like I don't. It was a massive number of votes, because back then statesmen were required to do their job, and they would continuously vote over and over again. Some of them even sleeping in Congress. But now they'll take 2 or 3 votes, and spoiled Western culture says that they're allowed to vote to go home, even though we're paying them anyways, right? And as of today, McCarthy has lost his 12th ballot. But the thing was, it kept gaining more and more defectors from Kevin McCarthy, and then today, there was 14 Republicans that flipped from being defectors, right? So what that tells me is that there's obvious political theater going on, but everybody who voted against McCarthy yesterday and they flipped their vote for him today, they rambled on and on about getting back to work or progress for the people, and that's why they changed their vote. But every last one of them, without fail, looked like they were sick, literally physically sick, shaking their heads. One of them didn't even, I think there was multiple of them that didn't even vote initially, and then they come back to the people who missed the vote if they weren't in the room or whatever have you. And I mean, they literally physically looked sick. And you can speculate as to what changed. Supposedly that they're in their little statements, but because all they have to do is say a name, right? some of them stand up and they go on this big tangent about why they're voting the way they're voting or whatever. But it doesn't make sense that they're doing it for the people. I don't think anybody believes that. I don't believe they're just trying to get back to work or progress for the people or any of that. So it makes you wonder what exactly is changing. Why is it that the Freedom Caucus is no longer defecting and are essentially falling in line with the establishment? You would think these people wouldn't get voted in anymore for this, but apparently it's the theater the people want to see.
That's about the size of it. And I think there's an even bigger fiction going on that has been completely disregarded. There are a couple articles about this out there, but you're really not seeing them. I remember reading one like a year ago from that political blog, like 538. Basically, the House of Representatives has a serious representation problem. It's supposed to be the organ of the legislature that's closest to the people. It's supposed to be the one that very closely reflects the changing opinions, which is, of course, counterbalanced by the Senate. But that doesn't actually work anymore. In the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 reads in part, the number of representatives shall not exceed one for every 30,000. That's a pretty clear ratio. And for a while, we were able to keep that ratio kind of in check. It went down as in there were more people per representative, sometimes a little bit less. But the trend was always it getting worse and it getting less representative over time. But they would just keep expanding the House, commensurate with the population increasing. This worked until Congress was unable to agree on how to reapportion itself following the 1920 census, and in exasperation, gave up the ghost forever by passing the Permanent Apportionment Act of 1929, nearly a decade later fixing chamber size at its present 435. Quoting directly from an article I wrote on this about a month ago. The system was already breaking down by 1929. At that point, the average district contained 210,000 citizens. Remember that 30,000 was the constitutional requirement, which had long since slipped into the mists of history. After 13 years of ignoring it, the problem has not magically gone away. It's gotten much worse. As of 2020, the average congressional district contained 760,000 citizens, an absurd and dysfunctional number incapable of effective representation. But it gets worse from here, because flashback to constitutional debates where we've got the Federalists and my favorites, the Anti-Federalists, talking about the Constitution and representation and what the possible downfalls of this Congress model are going to be. And you have some letters from the Anti-Federalists that are saying that 30,000 is going to be way too high. That's not democratic enough. So I have here is an excerpt from the Additional Letters of the Federal Farmer, which was a prominent anti-federalist essayist. And I quote, a man that is known among a few thousands of people may be quite unknown among 30 or 40,000. On the whole, it appears to me to be almost a self-evident position that when we call on 30 or 40,000 inhabitants to unite in giving their votes for one man, it will be uniformly impracticable for them to unite in any men except for those few who have become eminent for their civil or military rank or their popular legal abilities. It will be found totally impracticable for men in the private walks of life, except in the profession of law, to become conspicuous enough to attract the notice of so many electors and have their suffrages, unquote. So that's really surreal to read, saying that 30,000 isn't going to be representative enough, and now we have 760,000 to 1. So the House of Representatives is a sham anyway. It doesn't serve its constitutional duty, and at this point, it's become a clone of the Senate. It's just another aristocratic body that's filled with lawyers. The federal farmer was right. The only people who make up these bodies are just lawyers who are totally disconnected from us. It's all one big club, and people like you and I aren't invited.
Yeah, correct. The famous George Carlin line. Yeah, and it's also the same club they like to beat us over the head with. Yeah, so I'm taking a look here at the Timcast at the Timcast website about it. So you've got 14 defecting Republican flips votes. So they were, let's see what he says here. Uh, although McCarthy gained 14 votes, he lost his 12th ballot for speaker by failing to avoid a five vote threshold. He needed less than five defectors, and he had a total of six or seven. Basically, there's not much. This is the entire article here, and um, basically it's saying that Kevin Gates was saying that McCarthy was occupying the House Speaker's office, and he was squatting in the office after losing three votes because he's already moved his stuff into Congress, and he's obviously not in there. As we're recording, I do believe they're taking another vote, so we'll see how it goes. But essentially, it's just a big sham, and I see a lot of different people like Tim Cass News for instance, and I think he had something like 20,000 concurrent viewers at one time watching this, and it makes me wonder. He also yesterday during the vote, he was asking how many of his concurrent viewers at the time what their partisanship was, and he gave four options, and it was Republican, Democrat, Independent, and Libertarian. And it was something like 23% libertarian, and it makes me wonder, like, I mean, I'm listening to this while I'm at work, right, and I hear them talking about the poll and the numbers and such, but it's like, how many of these people that are watching or listening actually care? And it's been 4 days now, and the world's not over. We don't have apocalyptic fires everywhere. It's not the colloquial term for anarchy, right? Because they say that if the government shuts down, it would be pure anarchy, and not in the sense that Rothbard or I or regular anarchists would talk about. So it makes you wonder, one, why is it that people don't notice that after a 4 day shutdown of no sworn, the 118th Congress has not even been sworn in yet, and everything is copacetic? And two, why is it so fascinating to so many tens of thousands of Americans that, I mean, they're not only are they not doing their job, they've been incapable of doing their job, and they put on a show. And what is it behind this show that they don't want us to see? I mean, it's just conjecture, it's just speculation, but I don't foresee a future where this isn't the norm anymore. Like, this is people like to watch this. It's like a football show, I guess. It's like watching a football game. You got your team, you root for your team, and then you watch ESPN afterwards, and you curse the other side because they lost or whatever, or they won. And it's like, it just makes me wonder, like, what is it you think that makes Kevin McCarthy so egotistical, for lack of a better word, that he will move his stuff into the House Speaker's office and then continuously sit there, vote after vote, knowing that the people in America don't want a neocon establishment type in the speaker position, and then all of the supposed representatives of the American people are stuck with representatives who fold under pressure. I mean, what is it that you think leads to this kind of degeneracy in our supposed representative bodies?
Well, it's just like what Lord Acton said all those years ago. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you've got, oh, guys, there's some siren going by outside. I'd The consequences of living in a society with state provided security. But I digress. But power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is just what happens when you have a lot of power concentrated in very few people. Like I said, in theory, The House of Representatives is supposed to be one of the most powerful bodies in the country, up there with the Senate, but the, the function of it has broken down, and now it's essentially working as Moskovka. It's a camouflage. It's something that's hiding the man behind the curtain. But the problem is the man behind the curtain isn't a man at all. It's the machinery of state. That's what's hiding. It's hiding the fact that the state itself, we're talking about the executive branch agencies, the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Education, hell, the Department of Agriculture, and all of these other couple letter acronym agencies that secretly do all the lawmaking through the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. All these agencies are the ones that actually run all of our lives. It's not Congress. Congress provides these broad marching orders, and then the head of these departments and the upper echelon apparatchiks interpret them any old way. They interpret them any way they want, fill in those blanks. Those blanks are conspicuously left by Congress and the lobbyists who write the bills on purpose so that they can provide as much leeway for the career bureaucrats as possible. And this just goes on behind closed doors. No matter what Congress does, the state, this deep state, whatever you want to call it, the administrative apparatus, which keeps going all the time and never sleeps, that will keep going. That's why we're not seeing any problems. That's why the world hasn't ended. That's why there isn't fire and brimstone raining from the sky when Congress has been dysfunctional for a few days. It's the fact that they aren't the government anymore. The legislature doesn't have the power that it should. They diverted unconstitutionally their power of lawmaking to the federal agencies.
Well, and I don't think it's I don't think we're in a lack of fire and brimstone because the governing power has been handed off unconstitutionally. I believe that it's just completely unnecessary, and the deep state that is doing the oppressive lawmaking is just that. It's oppressive. That's obviously not necessary. And as a minarchist, I would hope you would agree that these deep state bureaucrats and apparatchiks, they don't belong there. They don't deserve the power. And if they weren't there, we wouldn't not only be in fire and brimstone, but we would be much better off. And
yes, get rid of all of them.
yeah, exactly. So it's not the lack of governing of Congress that leads us to no fire and brimstone. And it's not because the governing power of the establishment is in the deep state with unelected bureaucrats that is a lack of fire and brimstone. It's because anarchism, the market, whatever you want to call it, in your everyday action, human action, that's why the praxeological nature of humans that Ludwig von Mises was talking about, that in everyday life is what governs humans. It's like you said a couple days ago. The governing organization is civilization is the predecessor to the governing organism. So therefore, it makes it's an add-on. It's not absolutely necessary, right? The people always say that in a libertarian world or an anarchist market world that there would be a lack of law and order. Well, to the contrary, anarchism or markets or however you want to explain it, ungoverning humans praxeologically moving about are the absolute mother of law and order. It's just like in the Myth of National Defense by the collection of essays that was put together by Hans Hermann Hoppe. It's not. It is just that. It's a myth. The market could solve for these things, and it's like if we had government controlling our clothes, let's say, we wouldn't. If we were talking about abolishing it and letting the market decide for our clothes or any other thing for that matter, people would not only react in terror because the government controls it. How would this look? What would it be? How would it work? And of course, we could posit our ideas We wouldn't be able to guess how many clothes makers there are, or whether or not it would all be made in the country, or if we would be exporting and importing. We wouldn't be able to tell all of the different market functions just by guessing, because we've never seen this before, right? But it most certainly would work. As we see, clothing does just fine. There's no reason why security, uh, uh, judicial systems, national defense, none of these things necessarily have to be monopolies. And in fact, I believe it to be detrimental to society that they are monopolies, especially by the type of power hungry bureaucrats that we have.
Indeed. Well, there are some positive developments over that, like what you said about breaking down the monopolies of state power in the past few years. Like Martin van Creveld wrote a book about 30 years ago about the rise and decline of the state, positing that a lot of the military infrastructure that was built up by the state in the 20th century, these levee en masse style mass armies, have been demobilized. The draft is going out of style. And as a percentage of GDP, military spending is decreasing by the looks of it, which is a step in the right direction, but I digress. The one distinction I made, because I agree with you, what you were saying, that it's not the bureaucrats in of themselves that the problem is, it's the political power itself. I agree, but the only distinction I make, and the point I was trying to make by saying that earlier, is that there's a qualitative distinction between laws made by legislators and law made by the bureaucrats, because the bureaucrats have the time, the numbers, and the money to go over things with a fine-tooth comb that Congress would never be able to do. So Congress is much, just by the difficulties of having the time and such to do this, their legislation has to be more generalized. It has to have more room for innovation. And
Sure.
the idea behind representative government was that nobody would be expanding on these laws, and that just Congress writes it, Congress leaves a large amount of room open, and civil society and spontaneous order, like Hayek and Ferguson wrote about, is going to come in and take up all the slack. But
Yeah,
now
and
that's not happening anymore. Now
yeah,
the slack is being taken up by the bureaucrats.
and not to mention the fact, we've talked about, obviously it's no secret to anybody in this country that a majority of the legislature is well beyond its constitutional restraints. That's no surprise. But not only that, we don't have pure statesmen. For one, none of this is voluntary. Most people don't like what's going on, right? And then on top of, like, I don't believe that there's any part of the Constitution that says that it's not, like, it's the John Locke theory of the social contract, right? So they thought that this was just, and philosophy has developed, libertarianism has developed to a great degree, and we understand that this is theft and coercion at this point. But not only that, but we don't actually even have the kind of statesmen that were the people who framed the Constitution. I mean, these people are highly unimpressive. And when they're up there, they're spending a majority of their time fundraising, and they're looking at the next political campaign and what they're going to do to get more votes and how they're going. I mean, these people are literally duplicitous. They will sit there and put on this theater that we're seeing now that everybody seems to want to talk about, and then on top of it, you'll see, if you watch, they're all intermingling, Democrats and Republicans. They're talking and they're having a good old time. Just another day at the office. These people are duplicitous. Even the radical progressives on the left and your neocons on the right, they are supposedly at odds ideologically, but you'll see them from time to time in Congress slapping hands like Kamala Harris and Mitch McConnell. I mean, you're supposed to have a progressive in Kamala Harris and a neocon in Mitch McConnell. But at the end of the day, they agree, because it's like I always say, there's two parties in this country, and it's the establishment and the rest of us.
That's absolutely the problem. Like I said in the previous episode, the last time that we had serious ideological competition in this country, where there was a statist party and a explicitly anti-statist, pro-liberty, pro-market party was around the 1890s with the Cleveland Democrats, the Bourbon Democrats, the Gold Democrats, all those tiny little factions of people who actually liked liberty. The Republican Party was never intended to be a purely anti-statist party. It was always a moderate statist party at best. It fluctuates, sometimes gets better, sometimes gets worse over time, depending on who's constituting it. But I digress. No matter what, we're still lacking, like you said, the Jeffersonian legislator. The people who are supposed to be making our laws are of a totally different character than the people who actually are today. And that's the problem. Regular people like you and I are now totally locked out of the system. We don't have enough of a platform to get into power. We don't have the money to get into power. And when you look at the breakdown by profession of who's in Congress, these people are all like the federal farmer was saying all those years ago. They're all lawyers. They're all these upper echelon aristocratic type people who don't mingle with the rest of us. They don't know what we think. They don't talk to us. They
Yeah.
accuse us of being these Walmart shopping hillbillies and
Hey, I
all
shop at
kinds of stuff
Walmart.
like that. I know, I swear by Walmart, but
I'm just kidding.
at
It's funny. I do. Yeah.
not everybody can
Oligarchy.
afford
Oligarchy
wholesale.
is the word that I think you're looking for. Oligarchy. These are the type of people we're dealing with.
That's exactly the problem. We don't have the same sort of legislator before that we used to have.
Yeah, we
There,
don't have statesmen. Now, you know me as a radical libertarian and anarchist, whatever label you want to put on me, I believe we should always be upward aiming for a more libertarian society with the, as Tim Pool would put it, the utopian view of anarchism, whatever that means. But nevertheless, we do not have statesmen. I mean, it's like I said, these people are just they are highly unimpressive. Like our president, President Biden. He's a career politician. I mean, he's overtly racist at times. He's obviously got dementia, and now we're seeing that there's a possible connection to him and the whole Epstein saga. So let's see what's happening here with the attorney general here and everything that's going on with that. So we got from Fox here, Virgin Islands Attorney General fired days after filing suit alleging J.P. Morgan Jeffrey Epstein ties. Government responds. The Office of U.S. Virgin Islands government governor, I'm sorry, Governor Albert Bryan is pushing back on media reports that the firing of Attorney General Denise George is somehow related to her recent lawsuit against the nation's largest bank, JP Morgan Chase, on its alleged connections to Jeffrey Epstein. George was reportedly fired Saturday, just 4 days after she filed a lawsuit in a Manhattan federal court on behalf of the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands, alleging that JP Morgan Chase turned a blind eye, quote unquote, to Epstein's sex crimes. The Virgin Island Consortium, which first reported George's firing, cited a person with knowledge of the matter, quote unquote, who claimed she filed a lawsuit without first informing Governor Bryan of such a major action, suggesting that the two events could be related. The governor's communications director, Richard Mata Jr., said the reports are not entirely, quote unquote, accurate, but he declined to comment further. The governor relieved Denise George of her duties as Attorney General, Mata told Fox News Digital. I am not at liberty to discuss, of course not, details on personnel matters. I can only confirm that the media reports indicating that the JP Morgan lawsuit as the reason are not entirely accurate. I hope you understand. In her lawsuit, George alleged that JP Morgan Chase violated the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which it did, the Virgin Islands Criminally Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, which it did, and the Virgin Islands Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Business Practices Act. I'm not aware of that particular legislation, but I'm sure they violated that as well. The Attorney General brings this action after presenting her findings in September 2022 in her ongoing effort to protect public safety and to hold accountable those who facilitated or participated in, directly or indirectly, the trafficking enterprise Epstein helmed, the complaint read. It continues. The investigation revealed that J.P. Morgan knowingly, negligently, and unlawfully provided and pulled the levers through which recruiters and victims were paid and was indispensable to the operation and concealment of the Epstein trafficking enterprise. George claimed J.P. Morgan Chase knowingly facilitated, sustained, and concealed Epstein's human trafficking network, which he operated from his home in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and failed to comply with federal banking regulations. She alleged that the financial institution facilitated and concealed suspicious wire and cash transactions for Epstein's criminal enterprise, whose currency was the sexual servitude of dozens of women and girls in and beyond the Virgin Islands. Let's see. The bank declined to comment further when reached by Fox News Digital on Tuesday. Basically, their only comment was, since then, J.P. Morgan Chase has cooperated with investigations into Epstein and others. J.P. Morgan Chase's ongoing commitment to combating money laundering and sex trafficking is unwavering and steadfast. Yeah, I call bullshit right away. They most certainly do not. They might make it seem as though there's a humanitarian bent to their organization, but if anybody has paid attention to any amount of content that I made, our oligarchical structure with monopolization and cartelization is in fact the big banks at the top. The central bankers are the most corrupt people on this planet. Do I have anything more than speculation or conjecture on this particular situation? No, I don't. I'm just reading the press, and I'm speculating on exactly what this is, or what it could mean. But Whitney Webb has a fantastic book. I forget the name. It's the sordid collusion that led to the rise of Jeffrey Epstein. It's a basically 1,000 pages, 2 volumes, and it details from the 1930s to the Epstein's unaliving himself. And it literally just details how the central intelligence apparatuses, the entire deep state, the bureaucratic state, the early mob and organized crime, our federal government, and the big bankers were all in this sordid relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and others, among the Contras and many others. Not enough time to get into all that right now, but basically what it boils down to is these bankers are at the top of a monopolized cartel, and they have been I'm not going to incriminate JP Morgan Chase specifically for certain crimes, but the big bankers that are all tied in with all the central banks of the world have indeed been caught multiple times in drug trafficking, human trafficking, money laundering. I mean, when the Contras happened back in the 80s, they were denied funds from Congress to support the Contras. The Central Intelligence Agency literally subverted the law, the legislature, and the people with taxpayer money, and were drug trafficking so that way they could have illicit money. And then they took it to the big banks and laundered it through the big banks because it was dirty money and they needed large amounts of cash to pour into the Contras and to fund their operations. And the way that they got these big bankers on deck, as documented by Whitney Webb, was sexual blackmail. And I just find it hard to believe that all of this has just evaporated now that there's finally a principled person in a statesman position and is filing a civil suit against them. And then on top of all of the malfeasance that's connected with this particular case, coincidentally, let me go ahead and pull up this. We got another article here. Biden vacations in Virgin Islands as Americans face problems at home. And this is all true, right? So let's see. Let's connect the dates here. All right. So let's take a look. Yeah. Largest bank connections, recent lawsuit. Okay, so okay, was first reported. Okay, yep. Okay, here we go. This is what we need. Come on, what the what is it? Okay, here we go. Attorney General. Okay, so published on December 31st, right? Denise George has been terminated. And yep, with the version. Okay, yeah, okay. So it was December 31st, 2022, that she was in fact fired. As millions of Americans suffer through a deadly once in a decade blizzard, President Biden just landed the U.S. Virgin Islands for yet another vacation with wife. So let's see. New York, Biden takes 2 week break. President Biden will wrap up a 2 week. Okay, so when the president and his family describes their latest getaway. When was that? I think I might have got the wrong article there. Yeah, that's the wrong one. That's not the right one. See, they tried to cover all this up, the connection. Oh, okay, January 2nd, right? So approximately the same exact time that uh that the attorney general was fired, Biden, who hasn't been to the Virgin Islands in 2 years, has now just up and gone there. Now I understand that Biden could have he could have easily just made a phone call or whatever, but I just I find it hard to see coincidences in things like this. The man has dementia. He is a puppet. He ends up in the Virgin Islands directly at the same exact time frame that this woman is fired, and it just seems as though it would be naive to dismiss the possibility of malfeasance, especially as the career criminal that Joe Biden is. What are your thoughts on the whole situation here?
Yeah, that's about the size of it. Could be a coincidence, but it's just so weird. He doesn't go down there a lot. He sure vacations a lot, but not there. Like you said, that article back there said his vacation time was outstripping Obama, Trump, and Bush, but whatever, that's just a sideshow. Everybody likes to make fun of the same president's vacation time, but I digress. But he's not in the Virgin Islands very much. Then he just goes down there, and right within days to potentially hours, then
Yeah,
the
he
decision is
was
made to can the attorney general who's
yeah, he
suing
was there
his
the
friend.
Tuesday before she was fired, and yeah, he hasn't been there
Amazing.
in 2 years due to COVID. He hasn't been traveling around much. Well, not to vacation anyway, not personal trips, and it just seems the timing is impeccable in my view. But we got one more article that we can bring up here and discuss one more thing here. So yeah, just to close that segment, I mean, you got uh Biden possibly being in line with some amount of cover up. Now, I don't think that necessarily makes him involved in Epstein's crimes, but he has some amount of incentive and interest to cover up said investigation. And I don't they're saying, like I read in the article, that she's not being fired due to that civil lawsuit, but she can no longer carry out that lawsuit because she was doing it as her capacity as attorney general. And well, now she's not the attorney general, so that goes to show you. All right, so the next segment we'll work on is New York lawmakers have become uh, nation's highest paid after 29% raise, excuse me. So let's see what they got here. Albany, just in time for the new year, New York lawmakers have become the highest paid state legislators in the nation. Let me make sure we got the right screen up here so that way everybody can see it better. There we go. Okay. Just in time for the new year, New York lawmakers have become the highest paid state legislators in the nation under a bill signed Saturday. Members of both houses are getting a pay raise of $32,000 for a base salary of $142,000 under a bill Governor Kathy Hochul signed a day before her inauguration Sunday. That's a 29% raise over their previous salary of $110,000. The law went into effect Sunday. Before the pay boost, state lawmakers in California were the highest paid with a yearly base salary of $119,000 according to National Conference of State Legislatures. New York lawmakers passed the pay raise bill during a special session in late December. The new pay raise comes with restrictions though. Starting in 2025, outside income will be capped at $35,000 a year. So pay in excess of that from military service, retirement plans, or investments will still be allowed. Some Democrats in the legislature supported the pay raise and said it was necessary in order to keep up with the high cost of living. But some Republican lawmakers spoke out against the bill during the session, criticizing the ban on the outside income. Their attempt to buy political cover by instituting a ban on outside income won't make Albany better. It will make it worse, said State Senator George Borrello in explaining his no vote on the bill. Borrello said the ban would discourage citizen legislators or enterprising, accomplished individuals with real world experience from entering politics. The last pay raise state legislators received was in 2018, and that was the first raise in 2 decades. So let's go ahead and switch back here. So essentially, what you have is the Democrats using political cover to give themselves a pay raise, and they are absolutely right that the cost of living is shooting upwards, and it's because of legislators that are using the money printer go burr modern monetary money theory to devalue and debase the dollar at a radical rate that has never been seen in this country and probably won't be for after they crash the dollar, that is. So of course they see that their above average income that comes with all the political power and the political connections and the inside trading. They also need to keep up with the Joneses, is what I read from that. And the Republican is banging on the Democrat, basically saying, "Oh, well, this is going to keep corporatists out of the government," and the Democrats are basically saying, "Yeah, that's what we like." Thoughts?
Yeah, that's just about the size of it. What gets me is that right when we're also talking about how dysfunctional the federal Congress has become, the same thing, the same dynamics we talked about earlier are played out in microcosm in the regular state level governments to a smaller extent, because as I said a couple podcasts earlier, political power that is, follows the law of economies of scale. And it's more efficient to do it on a big scale than it is on a smaller scale. So by necessity, the corrupting influence of a bureaucracy is going to be much worse in Washington than it will be in Albany, but nonetheless, the same problems are still playing out at the lower state levels. And even so, even while they're abdicating their lawmaking power and exporting it to bureaucrats, which produce a lower quality and more tyrannical sort of legislation, and a lot more of it, then in the midst of that, they vote themselves a pay raise from their already exorbitantly high wages. I wish I had wages like that, but just whatever. Once again, it's all a big club. It's all one team, and people like us, the plebeians, aren't invited.
And what's funny is you've got the partisanship reported, right? And it was actually that article particularly was pretty objective. They reported the facts of, and the Republican is playing partisanship and saying there's no this is going to keep high level individuals from being statesmen, right? And it's I don't see him actually having a problem with it. His constituents, I would assume he's from, if he's a Republican in the legislature in New York, he's probably from upstate. So, he's got his reasons to placate his voter base. So he's obviously got to vote no and put out the spiel that, oh, this is going to keep out great statesmen and such. But he's still getting the pay raise. They know in ahead of time whether or not they have these votes or not, right? It's just like the federal legislature. It's just on a smaller scale, but it's just the same old thing. They literally steal your money, and then they degrade the little bit of money that you have left, and then at the end they say, "Oh, sorry, we're of a landed aristocracy. We are the oligarchy." In your face, plebeian.
Absolutely. There really isn't much more to say about it. That the state governments have the same problems that Washington does, just in microcosm, and both legislatures, talking about the state level and the federal level, are essentially just smoke screens for an administrative state which has become completely unhinged and produces a much more tyrannical sort of legislation, and it's just going to get worse.
and
Unless
and
there's going to be serious reform, we're going to keep doing this. It was like what Thomas Jefferson said, is that the tendency of liberty is to yield to government.
Yeah.
This is just how governments work. They grow unless you stop them from growing.
Yeah, well, they always, I would argue, they always grow inevitably no matter what. So that's why I'm opposed to them entirely. But I understand your argument. And not to mention, New York was among they lost a congressional seat this last midterm, so that means their population has dwindled. And I forget, I'm not going to bring the article up. You can go look for it yourselves. They were among the top 5 states who lost constituency. So not only are they extracting more taxes, but from a less base. So the percentage of taxes has risen even higher, not just because they're taxing more for their salaries, or maybe they shifted it around. I doubt it, but it's also on a smaller tax base. So the percentage is even higher because of that exponentially. I mean, it's just, how many ways from Sunday do you spit on it first before, or some lipstick so I look pretty, or it's just terrible what they do to the American people. Do you have anything else you'd like to say, Mr. Marquis?
I think we hit all the highlights. Congress is a joke, and essentially we
Biden's
need to
corrupt.
reset the size of government.
Sure.
All these Davos people, they want to do a great reset and bring about a global Soviet Union. We need to do a great reset of our own, but instead of that, we need to radically decentralize everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
The
burn the CFR, get rid of
yeah.
the whole code of federal
Yeah, the
regulations while
World
we're at it.
Bank, the IMF, the CFR. I mean, all of these institutions of unelected bureaucrats are obviously pulling the strings, because if a neocon like Kevin McCarthy can lose 12 votes and sit up there confidently waiting for people to just flip with no concessions, that just shows you that the establishment is still in full control, regardless of who's in there. And then you've got, the story with the attorney general being essentially ousted from making even a civil litigation against the big banks, the oligarchy at the top. Yet once again, the oligarchy is involved in that story as well. And then you've got the mini state level oligarchy in New York with a lower tax base, adding more taxes for themselves, plundering the people some more as they degrade the dollar. So, I mean, it's just, it is it's amazing how all of these things are interconnected, even though as they seem they're not connected. So I appreciate your time for coming on with me, Cruz, and we will definitely be recording again here soon. I appreciate you.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, as always.
Yes, sir.